Israeli Minister Benny Gantz has announced his resignation from Benjamin Netanyahu's emergency government, despite pleas from the Israeli Prime Minister not to abandon the coalition. His departure had been expected after he presented Mr Netanyahu with a June 8 deadline to come up with a clear exit strategy for the war in Gaza. Mr Gantz has repeatedly clashed with Mr Netanyahu over post-war plans for the region and has called on the Prime Minister to set a date for elections. Polls have shown Benny Gantz to be the most formidable political rival to Mr Netanyahu, whose popularity has wavered in the aftermath of the October 7 attacks. In a televised address, Mr Gantz said he could not support the Israeli leader any longer.
Regrettably, Netanyahu is preventing us from advancing toward true victory, which is the justification for the ongoing and painful cost of war. That is why we are leaving the emergency government today with a heavy heart but with full confidence.
Now, his resignation has prompted mixed reactions from the Israeli public.
Maybe it can be a positive thing. I think using always the card of now it's not the time to be political is dangerous because it's been already 8 months of war.
I don't think that someone from the government should leave us at the time of war. I believe we should be united and should be staying strong as a nation.
It's good that Gantz is leaving the government now. I believe that he's doing what he thinks is best for the country and his intentions are right. And maybe this will bring to election soon.
While Benny Gantz's departure does not pose an immediate threat to Benjamin Netanyahu's governing coalition, former consul-general of Israel, Alon Pinkas, says it could impact ceasefire discussions.
This was weeks brewing into fruition. It was scheduled for yesterday, for Saturday, because of the rescue and extraction operation in Gaza. Mr. Gantz postponed his statement by 24 hours. No, this was not surprising at all. Nor were his arguments or his argumentation rather on why he's done so.
And what is his argument as to why, and why do you think he has quit?
Oh, okay. On the 18th of April, Mr. Gantz submitted a list of 6 demands to the Prime Minister, in which he specifically asked for a coherent post-war Gaza political plan, in which he asked for a different prosecution or different management or different grand planning of the war, and in which he asked for a clearer policy on the hostage and ceasefire proposal. This is even before Mr. Biden presented it. This is in April. Immediately, 2 hours later, Mr. Netanyahu said no to all of these demands. So Mr. Gantz could and should have left the government already then. He, for his own reasons, procrastinated and postponed and stalled, hoped that he could somehow extract some answers from this. He did not. So in the last 2-3 weeks, there has been tremendous public pressure on him to stand by his word. At the time, he said, my deadline is June 8th. That was Saturday. And so yesterday, push came to shove and he was ready to make a statement. So in that respect, there's no surprise.
How has Benjamin Netanyahu reacted, and what does this mean for him?
Well, he reacted in his on-brand, disingenuous, holier than thou. How could you do this in the middle of a war? This is about unity. You're leaving us all alone. Where's your responsibility? Where's your sense of duty? That's nonsense. He's been conning and manipulating Gantz for 8 months. People have been telling this to Benny Gantz privately, publicly, in the press, in the political system, but he felt that he's the adult in the room, the mature influence in the cabinet, which, as it appears to be, he was not. And so Mr. Netanyahu is now trying to squarely blame him for leaving at a time of crisis.
So what does this mean, if anything, for the war in Gaza?
In one word, nothing. This doesn't change anything. I mean, in terms of the political arithmetic, I know you asked about the war, Gemma, but in terms of the political arithmetic, the government is not falling. it went down from 72 members of parliament to 64 out of 120. So that's just over the 61 majority. In terms of the war, it leaves two issues open. Whether or not Mr. Netanyahu will agree to the proposal that Mr. Biden presented and said that it was originally an Israeli plan. So now we are in a bizarre 1984 type situation in which Mr. Netanyahu rejects Israel's proposal. I know it sounds bizarre, but this is the nature of Israeli politics, and this perhaps is the nature of Mr. Netanyahu. It doesn't change the actual management of the war and the southern part of the Gaza Strip in Rafah, where Israel is making incremental advances, but has not yet launched a major operation. So I don't see how this affects the government. Now, the war. Now, if Mr. Netanyahu, for some reason, decides to accept the deal that President Biden presented, he will get support from the opposition, even if members of his extreme right-wing coalition vote against that. So I don't see how Mr. Gantz's departure affects the war at all.
What about the operation on the weekend? 4 Israeli hostages rescued. Will this impact Israeli sentiment about Netanyahu's plans in Gaza?
Not much. I mean, look, it was an extraordinarily well-executed, meticulously planned, precise intelligence-driven, heroic operation. But that's micro tactics, Gemma. That did not have any effect on the war. That doesn't change the fundamental elements of the equation in Gaza. You can even argue that these 4 could have been rescued or released had there been an agreement, perhaps with many others, dozens of others like them. It didn't happen. There was expected and even justified and natural elation in Israel over what had happened. It restored people's pride and sense of, gung-ho, we could do it, and look what we did. But this was an extraction operation. This was not about defeating Hamas, and heroics and impeccable planning and execution aside, this has no bearing on the war whatsoever.
And what Benny Gantz articulated, the frustration with the war, the lack of plans for Gaza post-war, is this what we're seeing increasingly from other world leaders?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would have expected Mr. Gantz to realize this much earlier, but, as goes the cliche, better late than never. And he did realize this. Mr. Netanyahu, from day one, has refused to come up with a plan, has been reluctant to engage the Americans in terms of their ideas. Even if he doesn't like some of them, he just refused to engage. This was a war that was fought without political objectives, without attainable political objectives. The theory of war, the modern war, that any military means must be aligned with political objectives. Otherwise, it is pointless. Well, the pointlessness of this is exactly what Mr. Netanyahu has been prosecuting. And that is something that Mr. Gantz and Mr. Eisenkot, his political partner, who was also an IDF and Israel Defense Forces chief of staff. So you had 2 lieutenant generals as politicians now, imploring Netanyahu to come up with a plan. And when he did not, after many months that he refused, finally, Mr. Gantz realized that this can't go on. And indeed, in his remarks made Sunday evening in Israel time, just a few hours ago, he said that he calls on the government to adopt the plan that was presented by President Biden.